In this episode of Super Seicento, I've got a spring in my step because the series and the car are going to be hitting a new low. Hi everybody, welcome back to Super Seicento, and this time we're going to be doing a mod that is both function and form because we're going to be lowering the car. Because the thing is, it does look good with the visual mods we've already done to it, but I want to get it looking a bit lower because, as you might have seen before, it's got one hell of an arch gap. In fact, come here, I'll show you how low it is. MCM shoe test, the shoe goes in there. That's not right, the shoe still goes in there, we are way too high. That's why you get the body roll when you go around corners, that's why it's a little bit wobbly on tight corners. We don't want to do that, we want it to look more aggressive and we want it to ride a bit lower to improve the handling. So to that end, I bought these. These are 35mm lowering springs. It's a company called Low, L-O. And if you look in here, these two are a little bit tied up, but these are the springs we're going to be installing. We've got a set of 4, there's one still in the box, and these are going to lower the car 35mm all round to improve the handling and the look. It's really simple, and I reckon it should be a quick and effective mod. So let's get to it. With the car securely on the ramp, we can start by lifting it up, removing the wheel, and then undoing the lower strut bolts. With a spanner on the nut, a rattle gun will do it, no problem at all. However, accessing the inner bolt will require an extension and for us to turn the steering in order to get access. Next, we undo the upper strut bolt, and then it's back up again to remove the now fully unbolted strut from the car. With a bit of wiggling and persuasion, it eventually comes out. Aha! There we go. Okay, the old strut is out. Right. It's then over to the spring compressor. Health and safety disclaimer. Springs on a strut can be under high compression and may fire out with considerable force if simply released, which potentially injures people. Spring compression, therefore, is not optional, unless you fancy relocating your face. You can use manual ones, but this one's air-powered, and the 2 rubber horseshoe shapes hold the spring in place. Once force is applied to the horseshoes, the spring is compressed. We can tell the spring's compressed now because the shock absorber is free. Now the shock absorber is loose, the strut top and the top hat are unbolted and removed, so the shock absorber can be slid out. Hey! The tension is released in the spring compressor, allowing the old spring to be removed, and then it's time for a quick comparison. So here we've got the 2 springs next to each other. The black one is the old aged one, standard ride height. The red one is the new lowering spring. You can see just there, look how much bigger the black one is. That is going to be not the actual significance of our drop, but that is what gives us the lowered ride height, is the much shorter spring. With the new spring seated in place and then compressed, we can put the top hat and the strut top back on, and then we've got one complete strut with a lowered spring. Lovely. We're good. That's one strut with the new spring on. Looks good to me. Seats there, just stop it spinning. And also at the top there, you see how it sits in the rubber? Oh yeah, I see. That stops it spinning up there. And that just keeps it all planted and in place, yeah? That's it? Yeah. Poor old guy. You think this old suspension is 15 years old, it's done 125,000 miles, compared with brand new, shiny, lovely new springs. The strut goes back in place, and then we lower the car back down to line up the upper strut bolt. I then use my almighty force powers to raise the lift back up before we wrestle the lower bolt holes to line up, and then we finger tighten the bolts just to get everything started. Aha. Yes, yes. Next, I drop one of the nuts. Then we tighten everything back up on the bottom, and on the top, the wheel goes back on, and that's it, number 1. That's one spring, done. Next up, it's my turn to do the passenger side front spring, undoing the lower strut bolts with the rattle gun, then the upper strut bolts before the near side front strut comes out entirely. Get it all the way, okay? Yes, I've got it. Ha-ha! Strut is off. The shock is removed, the new spring seated, everything bolted back together, and then I put the passenger side strut back in place, only this time equipped with a brand new lowered spring. After some wrestling, the strut's gone back in, and with all the bolts done up top and bottom and a quick camera change due to a flat battery, the wheel can go back on and the passenger side front spring is all done. Then it's onto the rear springs, and we start by spraying penetrating fluid onto the rear wishbone bolts, then losing a spanner. Did you leave it on the other side? Oh, there it is. 19. Spanner found, we can use it to help undo the rear wishbone, and after removing the wheel, we undo the rear shock bolts, use a transmission jack to take the load off of the rear wishbone, and the old spring can be pulled free. Time for another comparison. So that's the difference. Look, these two springs are actually pretty much the same height. This one's a little bit smaller, but it's in the closeness of the coils. You'll note this one, there are probably just as many, if not more, coils in it, but they're a lot closer together than they are on this one, which means we're going to get mad lowered ride height. Next is a matter of pulling the rear wishbone down to maximise entry space, and the new springs simply being slotted into place. We then jack up the rear wishbone with the transmission jack, and the shock absorber and wishbone bolts can be put back in and tightened up, which gives us one fully installed rear lowering spring. The left-hand side is the exact same process, only undoing the bolts and removing the spring proves to be bizarrely much easier for the passenger's side. Slotting it in is easy too, and with all 4 springs now installed and everything put back together, we can put the wheels back on, take a minute to admire our lovely new suspension, and then lower the car down and see what it looks like. A process that's slightly interrupted by another dead camera battery, but once we'd switched to my phone camera, it's time for the big reveal. Has it dropped the front a bit? That's a lot better than it was, I'll tell you that. It may not look it, but there's already a reasonable drop in ride height. You can't really see that on camera, but it is a little bit lower. It's a fair bit lower. I mean, look, you can't get your fist in there anymore, which you could do before. I think we're still going to need some time to settle, but it's still looking better than it did. After getting a full wheel alignment, which you really should do after doing anything suspension related, we give the springs a couple of weeks and about 500 miles of driving to properly settle in. Now let's jump forward to the present day. You now join me back in the original spot where I actually first revealed the car to you all in October of last year, and given a few hundred miles driven and a couple of weeks to properly bed in, as well as a full alignment obviously, we now get an idea of what the lowering springs have done to the look, ride and handling of my car. Let's start with the look. The car, as you can probably see, is quite a lot lower. In fact, the general measurement seems to be around 40mm lower than it was before, or 4cm. Some people would argue you should have even less arch gap for a more aggressive, sporty look, but it's worth bearing 2 things in mind. First of all, this is a daily driver, and second of all, I do still need to regularly get over big speed bumps and badly surfaced roads, so a bit of arch clearance is necessary so that I don't break my spine off. With that said, there is a hell of a lot less arch gap than there was, and depending on what type of shoe you're wearing, it now passes the fabled MCM shoe test. Then there's the ride quality, which I expected to be really badly affected with how much closer together the coils were on the new springs, but actually it's ended up going really well. The ride is definitely firmer, it's definitely less soft than it was on the stock springs, but that's actually no bad thing. It's given the car a more sporty, more kind of communicative feel to the ride, and it definitely gives you the confidence to push it a bit harder. There's no denying it isn't as soft, it's not quite as plush over bumps and so on, but frankly that's a small price to pay for how much better it now feels. It definitely feels harder, firmer and a lot sportier in your hands. But the big difference is to the handling. As I've said, the coils on the new springs are a lot closer together than they were on the old ones, and this means that the car has less physical suspension flex when you go around a corner, which has done wonders for the handling. It's killed the understeer, it's made the steering sharper, and there's a hell of a lot less body roll even when you're going around a roundabout fast. Not that I do that. So in conclusion, every aspect of the car affected by the lowering springs has been in a positive way. The much lower look it's now got gives it a more aggressive and more sporty look to it. The ride, while slightly firmer, is much more communicative and definitely feels better when you're pushing hard, and the improved handling is just a total transformation. I was smiling from the very first time that I drove it with the lowering springs on. It's not a difficult job to do, I really enjoy doing it, and especially considering the whole job, including the alignment, cost less than 90 quid, I frankly couldn't recommend it enough. If your car sits too high and is a little bit wallowy, seriously consider either lowering springs or coil-over suspension. It's a massive, massive difference, and I love every aspect of what it's now done to my brilliant little car. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click that thumbs up button and also subscribe for more Super Seicento videos in your subscriptions box as soon as they're released. But for now, thanks for watching everybody, and have a brilliant rest of your day. Ta-da!